Yo guys, what's going on? I'm Tim Kelly, joined by Justin Godsey. As always, this is the Real Sports Talk and Nation Sports Blog presents the 30 Clubs 30 Previews MLB Special. Today we are on to the Atlanta Braves, a team that last year went 94-68, won one of the two NL wild cards, and then in my mind got absolutely screwed in the NL wild card game. And it's something that a lot of people have forgotten about by now, but that infield fly call in the outfield bailed Matt Holliday and the Cardinals out in that game. I believe if that call is not made, the Braves do win that game, and they are able to advance further into the playoffs. But that did not happen, and I think that the Braves are in a season right now where they lost Michael Bourne, yes, but Justin, with the additions of the Upton Brothers, there are a lot of expectations on this team. And for me, Freddie Gonzalez is in a make-or-break year as the manager of this team. They have to not only get to the playoffs, but they have to accomplish something once they do get there.
This is a preseason favorite for the World Series. Because when you look at this team, just go to their depth chart on Braves.com, and you'll understand how scary this team looks overall. Now, this offseason, Tim, you mentioned the acquirement of Justin Upton and B.J. Upton via a trade and a signing for B.J. Upton to come to the Atlanta Braves team. I've always pictured that these two brothers are going to be on the Braves because this is a team that both brothers enjoyed watching growing up, because back in the day when, Upton and Justin Upton and B.J. Upton were little kids, they grew up watching and they said in multiple interviews. So, it's just a dream worthwhile for these two playing on the same team that they both love. Now, not only did they bring in Justin Upton and B.J. Upton, they also went out, they made some trades, they decided to part ways with they got Jordan Walden. He decided to part ways with Tommy Hanson, another prospect I think also went over to the Los Angeles Angels. But they're picking up Jordan Walden, who's going to be giving some depth in their bullpen. He did not have a most successful year in 2012, but 2013 will be good with this amazing bullpen. Hitting wise, they reacquired Jordan Schaefer, coming over from the Houston Astros. And you also picked up Chris Johnson. I can't leave him out. Also, a guy who I think the Diamondbacks traded a little bit too much to the Atlanta Braves, even though they did pick up, Randall Delgado and a bunch of other guys also. But I think Chris Johnson should have been a stay. But you know what? Going over to the Atlanta Braves, he's going to be the team's starting third baseman.
Yeah, I like the addition of Chris Johnson. Now, I was a huge Martin Prado fan. Even though I am a Phillies fan, I obviously see a lot of Braves baseball watching the NL East, and Martin Prado was so valuable throughout all the positions. And the other loss to remember is that Chipper Jones did retire. Now, Michael Bourne is gone in center field, and I'm going to get to the impact that B.J. Upton will have replacing him. But I think that the one thing that I like about Michael Bourne being gone is that while he provided a tremendous speed on the base paths, he was a very good leadoff hitter, he was extremely inconsistent, he was a streaky hitter, and he was someone that struck out a lot. And taking that out of this lineup, there will be some positives out of it, and I think that there are some MLB circles that do not realize that. So we'll get more onto the center field in a second. We'll begin breaking this team down at catcher. Brian McCann is not likely to begin the season, so Gerald Laird, the veteran who is coming over from the Detroit Tigers, in 63 games, he hit .282 last year, 2 home runs, 11 RBIs. He is going to be the opening day catcher in all likelihood. And then once Brian McCann, who's in a contract year, comes back, Justin, Gerald Laird will likely transfer into being the full-time backup for this team.
Another big, would you consider this a big accusation for them?
I think it's a nice move, veteran-wise, because he's a good guy behind the plate. He's been on some good teams, and he went to the World Series last year. So I like the addition of him as the backup catcher.
I agree a whole lot there, too, because, it's just every single year I've always had a lot of high expectations with Gerald Laird as a backup, because this is a guy who has Major League experience dating back to 2003 when he appeared with the Texas Rangers. And, he was in Texas for a while, and then he's now going through a phase where a lot of veterans do, and they bounce from team to team, and that's what Gerald Laird is doing. He went with Detroit last year. The year prior was St. Louis and Detroit, and then it goes back from there from his rookie year. But overall, Gerald Laird is going to be a solid backup. From Brian McCann is a shine-on guy. I think this is a guy who can go out there. Injuries are of course a concern, but when Brian McCann is healthy, this is a guy that will go out there and average 20 home runs a year, and that's phenomenal. Not only does he supply power, he's great behind the plate defensive-wise. He does great play. He has great play calling abilities, and he has a great relationship with Tim Hudson Hudson, just to name a couple guys like Chris Medlin, Paul Maholm, pretty much the whole pitching rotation. So he's a positive type of person behind the plate.
Yeah, he is, but he is someone that's coming off an injury-riddled season where he only played 121 games. Prior to that, in 2011, only played 128. He's closing in on age 30, and he's been a tremendous piece for this Braves team, supplied a lot of pop over the years, but he is someone that I think there's a legitimate possibility that if he struggles to stay healthy this year, once he comes back, which he won't start rehabbing till likely the middle of April, around April 18th, 20th, somewhere in that area. If he struggles, and this could very well be Brian McCann's last year, he's been open about that this offseason, that he understands that this is a make-or-break year for him with this team. Now, Evan Gattis will begin the season as the team's backup catcher while McCann is out. He will back up Gerald Laird, and Gattis is someone who's coming up from from playing an A ball last year, some Double A ball last year at the Double A level. He had 258, 9 home runs, 37 RBIs. So he's someone that you feel all right with bringing up early on, but I do not believe he's someone that is a long-term backup solution. I'm not a huge Evan Gattis guy, so he will be the backup. Freddie Freeman, I am very high on over at first base. He will be the starting first baseman. The one thing I want to see Freddie Freeman do is get the average back up a little bit, but last year the RBIs closed in on 194. He had 23 home runs, which was a career high. He doesn't strike out a ton. He cut down his strikeouts to under 130 last year. Justin, he's one of the best first basemen in terms of fielding, and he reminds me a lot of Mark Teixeira when Teixeira's with the Rangers, the Angels, his early days with the Yankees, when he was a better hitter. In terms of the fact that he is a very good overall hitter. He doesn't have quite the power that Teixeira had, but he also brings a tremendous Gold Glove caliber fielding ability over at first base, and he is still extremely young, and he's a bright piece for this team and one of the best young first basemen in the game right now.
Oh, absolutely. This is a guy who I've, scouted a long time ago, back in around 2008, 2009, when he was down at the A ball for the Rome Braves. And this is a guy who went out there in that full season with the Rome Braves, where he hit 18 home runs, 95 RBIs, and batted .316. I've always had a good feeling that he's going to bring it up to the major league level. In 2011, his average was really there. His numbers were solid. The 76 RBIs, I was hoping that he can get that up. And in 2012, we saw a kind of a fall in his average. He went from batting .282 in 2011 to 2012, where he batted .259. I have a lot of high expectations. He's a great fantasy pickup for anybody who's out there, in the middle of the rounds. And, Freddie Freeman's available at first base, because I know the first baseman, class goes like hotcakes in fantasy leagues, because they supply the power. They rack up a lot of fantasy points for you guys. But, you cannot go wrong with Freddie Freeman. This is a guy, year in, year out, will go out there and hit you about, 20 to 21 home runs a year. And I'll take that, but what I hope for this year for Freddie Freeman is that he gets that average up to about 280 to 285, maybe even 290 if he has the potential to do so. So overall, Freddie Freeman is a great first baseman in baseball, up and coming. He's still very young. He's a great young talent that this Atlanta Braves team used very well in the farm system.
Yeah, they did. And Chris Johnson, who will start over at third, he's listed as the main backup over at first base, but again, he's going to be starting at third. Dan Uggla will be the starter at second base, and I got to say, Dan Uggla had an extremely disappointing season. Really, he's been extremely disappointing in my mind since joining the Braves. I know he had 36 home runs in his first year, and that looks good because it was a career high, but I can tell you, they've just really never gotten the production out of Dan Uggla, and that they originally anticipated. And last year was even worse. In 154 games, he hit 19 home runs, 78 RBIs. He hit .220, struck out almost 170 times. This is a guy that they're paying to hit at least 30 home runs. He's not out there for his glove, which was once atrocious. It's gotten a little bit better. But they need the pop to come back out of Dan Uggla. They need a season like 2010 where he hits 287, 33 home runs, 105 RBIs. That's a Dan Uggla that this team traded for, and that's a Dan Uggla in my mind that the Braves and the Braves fans are still waiting to see.
Now, I have a lot of... during the draft, we'll just start off with this. During the draft, my fantasy baseball draft, Dan Uggla, he was available. You know what? I really took a gamble on who I should really take. I decided to pass up on Dan Uggla. I went to go with Ricky Weeks, but for you fantasy owners are out there that are in those expansion type of leagues, which features 16 teams, Dan Uggla, he's going to supply you with a lot of power. He's averaged the past couple of seasons has not where it's been, and you guys really rely on those home runs to rack up. Dan Uggla is your guy. 2012 we didn't see it, but you gotta have those power numbers from 2011, which was a career high for him with 36 home runs. You just hope that he can have a bounce back year, power wise in 2013. Hope to get his average up. Pretty much a comeback season overall, because you know what, with the Braves in 2012 it was just not the greatest, Dan Uggla that we've seen. But I have a lot of high hopes from him. I have a good feeling that he can actually come back and do so, because he's going to be playing a big pivotal role for this team if they're going to make the playoffs.
Yeah, he is certainly going to do that. And a guy who's going to play a pivotal role as a backup in this infield, both at second and shortstop, is the former New York Yankee Ramiro Pena. Pena did play in the World Baseball Classic, for those of you who watched. And Pena was someone a few years ago, came up, played respectably for the Yankees. He can play second, play short. He's got some speed. He's not a great hitter, but he's a respectable overall player. Last year, spent most of the time at AAA Scranton Wilkes-Barre, hit 258 with 2 home runs, 29 RBIs. So he's not going to be out there to bring you a great bat, but he brings you a good glove. He has some speed. You like that, and he has the versatility to play both spots in the infield. Now, Andrelton Simmons will be the starting shortstop for the Braves. Simmons last year in 49 games hit 289 with 3 home runs and 19 RBIs. So he's pretty impressive in his short amount of time with the Braves at the MLB level. At Double-A last year, which is where he spent 44 games, he hit 293 with 3 home runs and 21 RBIs, stole 10 bases. So he is someone that I believe it has the potential to be a base stealer at the MLB level. He stole 26 bases at the single-A level, high 8 ball a few years ago. So Andrelton Simmons is someone that I do have high hopes for. The Braves have another very good young prospect here. He's extremely young, coming over from Caraco, and I like him a lot.
And Andrelton Simmons is a guy who I really scouted with in 2011 when he was a part of the Lynchburg Hillcats. That's their A affiliate, A Advanced League. And you know what? This guy really wowed me. This is a guy who's not going to get you, a lot of home runs. I think on average he gets you about 3 a year, and that's what we saw last year in 49 games. But this is a guy who's going to be coming from the farm system, very well disciplined hitter. He's going to be coming up to the Atlanta Braves full-time. That's my biggest concern here. He has had, the minor league experience, but coming to full-time, it's going to concern me a little bit because, you know what, he's going from minor league, he hasn't really played at the AAA level, which features a lot of, veteran type of hitters or of players in baseball, who take a slump in their career and they're trying to get their ways back up to the major league level, but he hasn't really had that advanced type of play yet, and we are seeing this in spring training. So, in 14 games this season, in spring training, his average is not 14 games, that was in 2012, in 13 or 9 games this year, I apologize. He's really impressed me a whole lot. 2 home runs, 4 RBIs, batted .231. I just hope they can get that average up going into the season. It's still young. The season hasn't started yet, but this is a guy who's going to go on and steal you a lot of bases, and he's going to provide a great solid average. He batted .289 last year in the 49 games he appeared. And then we're going to be going over to Ramiro Pena, which I honestly said that he's not going to be in the deep future of the New York Yankees. A lot of people say he's going to be the predecessor to Derek Jeter once he retires. And no one can ever top the caliber that Derek Jeter had with the New York Yankees. And you know what? It's going to be kind of tough for the Yankees to replace him. And Ramiro Pena is just not that guy. But he's going to be playing, a deep role in this team as a backup, as a bench piece. And this is a guy who's going to go out there and most likely every Sunday, maybe even Saturday, as like a break type of guy who's just going to come in and fill in a role for a player who's going to be taking some rest.
Yeah, and I think that he is someone that, again, will play a pivotal role in this team. His success will determine a lot of what the Braves do. Now, Chris Johnson is going to be the starter over at third base, not to be confused with the Chris Johnson that plays on the Tennessee Titans. This Chris Johnson has been an under-the-radar player for the past few years. And is he a great player? No, but last year, in time with both the Diamondbacks and the Astros, hit .281 with 15 home runs, 76 RBIs, had a pretty impressive season in my mind. He came over in the Justin Upton deal, and he's not... I like Martin Prado. Again, I said this at the beginning of the I like Martin Prado more than him, but he is someone that at third base, he's a good option, and I think it made it worth getting Justin Upton.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, when you look over at the third base type of things, it's really of a mix because during the offseason, it was clear that, Juan Francisco, coming over from the Cincinnati Reds, was supposed to be named starting third baseman. But when they got, Upton and Chris Johnson, it was really just open field for these guys on who's going to outplay each other during spring training. And it was just announced a couple of days ago that it's going to be Chris Johnson. You cannot go wrong with Chris Johnson. This is a guy who, not only do I watch Giants baseball, I also enjoy watching the Astros. Because, a lot of people really down the Astros and how well, they advance their hitting and everything. But Chris Johnson, when he played for the Arizona Diamondbacks, who I've seen, firsthand, attending a lot of Diamondbacks games, really impressed me. Coming over in 44 games for the team, he batted .286, with 7 home runs, 35 RBIs. So he does have the power there, and he's a phenomenal third baseman. He's not going to be, your more advanced type of defensive type of third baseman. That's pretty much where Juan Francisco comes in, who's going to be serving as his backup. Now, a guy who I really disciplinedly watched with the Cincinnati Reds, he hasn't really had, that full season capabilities, but in 2012 he did have a fair share of third base time with Chipper Jones, serving as Chipper Jones' backup in 2012. His home run, it's about 9 home runs last year, 32 RBIs. He batted .234, so, this is a guy who once in his career he batted .273, and, it just kept on falling and falling as his years progressed, with the Reds, because they just use him as an up and down type of thing, give him a shot at the major just to fill in the role. So he's going to be coming over to the Braves as a bench piece. His power is not going to be really precisely where he's going to go out there and hit you, 20 home runs a year. No, he's going to go out there and hit you about, 11 to 12 home runs a year, unless he really, underestimates a lot of us and he just goes out there and really, is really productive and really disciplined at that plate this year.
Yeah, and we'll see if he is able to do that. Now, Juan Francisco, in my mind, is a solid backup for this team. I want to see him get the average up, but he's still young, and long-term could be the guy here. Justin Upton is a piece that the Braves have extremely high expectations for coming over from Arizona. If you guys watched last year's 30-team special, you guys know that I was extremely high on Justin Upton, picked him as my MVP, and he was an extreme disappointment, hitting .280 with 17 home runs and 67 RBIs. And I don't know what to expect coming into the season. And that's one of the reasons that I have a tough time thinking that the Braves have any chance to beat the Nationals in this division, because I just believe that both Upton brothers at times can be great. Now, there's no doubt about it that Justin is the better Upton brother, but I think that neither of them have ever displayed great consistency from month to month or year to year in their career. Justin Upton 2 years ago hit 31 home runs, 88 RBIs. He looked like a guy that could come back and maybe hit 35, 36 home runs, 100 RBIs, and instead he went in the wrong direction. And he did that in 2009 or 2010 after a tremendous 2009 season. So I'm not sure exactly what to expect out of him. He's young. He had a tremendous spring for this team. He is shifting over to left field because Jason Hayward obviously plays right field, so we'll see how that goes. But at the plate, we'll see what happens with Justin Upton. I think it's early to really say too much about him.
Now, it's really kind of an up and down type of thing for Justin Upton because, one season, we'll still go back to 2009, like Tim said, 26 home runs in 2009. 2010, it's 17 home runs. 2011, it's 31. Then it's back down to 2012 to 17 home runs. You know what? He's going to be playing a whole new position because I'm a guy who countless times, I've gone to Chase Field. I live in Arizona. I do attend the Diamondbacks games. And Justin Upton has felt at home in right field. Now, there was a lot of rumors that Jason Hayward could be playing in left field. But you know what? Jason Hayward really lives in right field. So what better position is to put Justin Upton in left field? That's the only option that they could go. They're not going to put him on the bench, even though that's what happened in Arizona for a small period of time. But, that's going to be a waste of talent there. But Justin Upton is a guy who I have a lot of high hopes on in 2013. Let's just hope that he can stay consistent because, you know what? This is a guy who has a lot of potential. Mm-hmm. So to go back and get up there to 25 to 26 home runs, I do not expect he's going to go back out there like we saw in 2011 and hit 31 home runs. He plays great defensive baseball. We saw with the Arizona Diamondbacks. He was a human highlight reel in 2011. But in 2012, with just a lot of anger issues going towards, the Diamondbacks manager, it's just, he was really falling off with that team, and he was just a negative influence in the late parts of the season last year, so they just had to trade him away, and I think they really traded, Chris Johnson was a part of the package, but I really thought that Chris Johnson should have stayed in Arizona, because that's a team who really needs that power right now at that third base position over there in Arizona.
Yeah, Justin Upton, again, is a guy that you mentioned all the potential that he does have, and I'm just waiting to see him consistently put it together. And my gut feeling really is that Justin Upton has the ability to explode in this lineup with some better pieces around him than I think he had in Arizona, some more developed pieces, and guys like Paul Goldschmidt and some of the other better pieces, maybe some of the pressure off of Justin Upton. But every time I think he's going to explode because he had a great spring, he ends up going in the other direction. So we'll see with him. Reed Johnson is going to be his backup in left field. Reed Johnson split last season with the Braves and the Cubs. And Reed Johnson, to me, is one of the better backup outfielders in the game right now. He hit .290 last year, 3 home runs, 20 RBIs, can play all over the outfield. I'm very high on Reed Johnson. Now, B.J. Upton in center field, I think the Braves really reached for him, giving him $80 million. But at the same time, that kind of was the market value, and he did have a pretty solid season last year in Tampa Bay, power-wise, hitting 28 home runs, 78 RBIs. The problem with B.J. Upton has always been the consistency and the average, because he's never hit over 246 since 2009. I mean, he's someone that we see flashes of it with him. He hit 300 back in 2007, and I don't know whatever happened to that B.J. Upton, to the point where he hit, in the last 4 seasons, he's hit 241, 237, 243, and 246. That was why I was hesitant to give him that deal. That being said, he's still 28 years old. He has a chance to continue to improve. I think he's going to reach the prime of his career within the next year or two, maybe even this year. And he does bring a good glove in center field and can steal bases. So there's good parts about B.J. Upton. Unfortunately, like his brother, there's some negative parts that come with him.
Yeah, the Upton Brothers, there's a positive and there's also that negative. That negative, the positive parts on B.J. Upton is, the past couple of seasons, the power is just phenomenal. 28 home runs, 2011 with the Tampa Bay Rays, 23 home runs that year, 28 in 2012. It's just that average, man. And the consistency, it's just never there, deep into the season. He really needs to be consistent, because the two Upton brothers, they do have a lot of phenomenal work to their bats, play great defensive baseball, and, they're on a team that they both love, and the team that they grew up admiring, and the team that they've always grown up wanting to be on. And, it's their time to shine. It's their time to take the spotlight and put it on them in Atlanta, because, these brothers, I think ever since, the Giles brothers, I think it's actually the time that we're at the first time we're seeing since the Giles brothers playing on the same team, Brian and Marcus Giles with the Padres, but now we're seeing, the second pair of brothers of B.J. Upton and Justin Upton playing on the same team. But overall, B.J. Upton really needs to be consistent enough to, go deep into the season and really step up in these, big situations when it comes to, the final at bat, and B.J. Upton is that guy. I think he's going to have, a big bullseye on his chest this year to be like, okay, you're going to be, the guy who really needs to be consistent throughout the full year. And overall, the Upton brothers, I think that BJ has a bigger bullseye on his chest than Justin does.
I don't know about that. I mean, BJ certainly got paid to be the bigger guy, but Justin is the one I think that everyone feels is the better player. Both of them have a bullseye, but the one thing that I do like is there are some other people in this lineup that are going to produce, assuming that guys like Dan Uggla can have bounce-back seasons. So not all the pressure is on them, but there still is some pressure, and we will ultimately see what happens. Jordan Schaefer was brought back as a backup. Schaefer was once one of the top prospects in the MLB with the Atlanta Braves, and then got suspended in the minor leagues for HGH, came up in 2009, began the season as a starter, and it just never worked out. I believe he ended up with the Astros via the Rule 5 draft, played there for a few seasons, including last year hitting .211 with 4 months, 23 RBIs. Just did not work out really overall, except for the 27 stolen bases he had. But as an overall player, he was not impressive in his time in with the Astros. They're bringing him back as a backup. He's still only 26 years old, so we'll see if Jordan Schaefer can revive his career here. Now, Jason Hayward is a starter in right field, and Jason Hayward is someone who has become an extremely good player in the MLB. I'm still waiting. He's another guy. All three guys in this outfield, they've shown flashes. I still think they can get better, and Justin Upton's no different, or Jason Hayward is no different. He had 269 last year. I think he can bring that up. I like the 21 stolen bases, but 27 home runs, 82 RBIs. This is a guy that coming up I pictured as an MVP candidate. He was a top prospect and came up and wowed us early. Fell into a sophomore slump and had a good bounce back year last year. But I think he's someone this year that, with an improved lineup around him, I think he's someone that should hit over 30 home runs for the first time in his career and probably reach between 90 and 100 RBIs, Justin.
Oh, no doubt. Jason Hayward, the thing that he can do with that bat is just nasty. And also with the flash of his glove out there in right field. Like I said about, with Justin Upton and everything, Upton's going to be going playing in left. But, Jason Hayward just really lives in right field. Can build a own house for him out there in right field. That guy just really takes over. I do have a big miscue with Jason Hayward. This is a guy who, in the farm system, he bats 300, all couple of years. He's been there since 2007 to 2009. I think he can get back up there. I think this is a guy who has a tremendous bat, great fielding ability, but this is a guy who, I've really been really disappointed to when it comes to that average. In 2010 he batted 277. It fell down in 2011 where he batted 227, and then in 2012 really came back, a whole new look to Jason Hayward where he really brought that bat and really swing for the fences. 27 home runs, 82 RBIs. But his average, it was okay for a bounce back from 2011, batted 269. But this is a guy who I think has a lot of potential to reach up to about 300, to bat 300, maybe 310, maybe even 322. I have a lot of expectations. I hope this guy can really get back to the form that we saw in the minor leagues.
Yeah, he is someone that I still anticipate to break out even higher than he did last year. Now, looking over to the starting rotation, before I get to the overall rotation, Brandon Beachy is a guy that had a tremendous start to the season last year. In 13 starts, while he was only 5-5, he had an ERA at 2, was considered a candidate to be a starter at the All-Star game, and then he needed Tommy John surgery, and that was the end of his season. He is expected to be back sometime in June. That's what they're saying now. We know that setbacks do occur, so we'll see when Brandon Beachy ultimately makes his debut. But he's going to be someone that if he isn't the ace, he's right there at number 2 or number 3 in this rotation. The guy that we are looking down as the ace of this squad is Tim Hudson. Tim Hudson last year 16-7 with a 3.62 ERA. I think he has been one of the most underrated, underappreciated starters that we've seen in the last 5 or 10 years. He began with Oakland, was tremendous there, and then we saw him in Atlanta for a while now. He's been extremely successful and consistent for this team. I want to see the ERA come back down closer to about the 3.30 range, because I don't like it at the 3.62 where it was last year. But overall, I like Tim Hudson a lot, and he is one of the better starters in the game, or that we've seen in the game over the last 10 years. Chris Medlin has a chance to be one of the better starters that we see over the next 10 years. He went 10-1 last year with a 1.57 ERA. Now, that was split between being a starter in 12 games and 50 total games. All the rest were in the bullpen, obviously. He was one of the hottest starters down the stretch, even pitched for the Braves into the playoffs. So Chris Medlin is someone that got extremely hot. We'll see if he can carry that over into this year. Now, Paul Maholm is someone that they picked up at the trade deadline. Maholm, between the Cubs and the Atlanta Braves last year, was 13-11, 3.65 ERA. I like Paul Maholm a lot. He had some good years in Pittsburgh, some rough years in Pittsburgh, but since then he seems to have figured things out. He's a solid middle of the rotation 3 or 4 guy, and I think once Brandon Beachy comes back, I'm extremely comfortable with him at the number 4 spot. Mike Minor is currently at the number 4 spot, and I think he's a back end of the rotation guy. At a 4.12 ERA last year, 11-10. We'll see. I could very well see that once Brandon Beachy comes back, Mike Minor might be the candidate to be out of this rotation, because at number 5, Julio Teheran is one of the top prospects in the MLB. While he struggled mightily at the AAA level level last year, going 7-9 with a 5.08 ERA. That was after they had brought him up to the MLB in 2011. And a lot of prospects, once they get the taste of the MLB, the minors gets boring to them. In 2011, in the minor leagues at AAA, he was 15-3 with a 2.55 ERA. He has tremendous stuff. I think Julio Teheran will be fine at the MLB level, and he will end up being a solid front end of the rotation guy. Extremely young then too as well. So Justin, looking at this starting rotation, give me your thoughts.
I love this rotation because it's just solid in depth. Because you got the young guys at the bottom, and then you got the more advanced guys up at the top of the rotation. Tim Hudson, who's been here in Atlanta, for a long time, since 2005, since coming over to Oakland. This is the guy who I think a lot of people really underestimate because during his time with the Atlanta Braves, he's really wowed us. This is a guy who will go out there season year in and year out. He will get you those 200 innings. He's going to get his time as the eighth of this squad. And he's mean. He has a mean fastball, and you cannot go wrong with Tim Hudson at number one. Number two on the rotation, you got Chris Medlin, who I have a lot of praise for last year. A guy who I really watched down in the farm system, with Gwinnett, with their Double-A affiliate. I think that's the Mississippi Braves. And 2012 was that year where I was really, really impressed with Chris Medlin. This is a guy who, was in the bullpen, including the 50 games that he played, both in the rotation and in the bullpen, but mainly in the bullpen last year. 10-1 with the 1.57 ERA, and that's in 138 innings pitched. And that is a phenomenal number, numbers when you look at Chris Medlin. This is a guy who's going to have a lot of praise going into the season. He's also a good fan favorite out there in Atlanta. Now, going over to Paul Maholm, another major league veteran. He has had good years with, like Tim said, has good years, and he had some bad years with the Pittsburgh Pirates. He went to the Chicago Cubs last year. He also came over with Reed Johnson in the trade with the Atlanta Braves. With the Atlanta Braves last year, he didn't really wow us in the 11 games that he played. He was 4-5. With a 3.54 ERA. This year I do have, a high expectation for Paul Maholm because, he's going to have the hitting behind him. I have him about with 11 to 12 wins, so that's going to be a career high for him in wins. That's just in my expectations. So we'll just have to wait and see how the full season works out for Paul Maholm, with the Atlanta Braves. Then you got the younger guys, the pride of Vanderbilt University, Mike Minor, another young guy who's still coming up through the system. Last year, the ERA was a little high at 4.12, 11 with an 11-10 victory, win-loss scenario there. Mike Minor, like I said, is still up and coming. He has a lot of stuff to improve. So, Mike Minor is down there, with Julio Teheran, a human highlight reel in the farm system, a guy who I really watched in 2011 and also in 2010. But in 2011, that was just his key point year, 15-3 with a 2.55 ERA. You're rounding out a phenomenal, pitching rotation with Julio Teheran, who is nasty. And you know what? I love that he's getting his full-time opportunity up at the major league level.
Yeah, and I like this rotation a lot. Justin, we know throughout the last few years it's been, if these starters can get a lead through the first 6 innings, ball game's over, because between the 3 guys that they've had in this bullpen, Eric O'Flaherty has been lights out. He might have been, over the last 3 years, he might be the best reliever in the MLB. I'll get to him in a minute. Johnny Venters, who's been the setup man, and Craig Kimbrell, who is probably the best closer in the MLB at this point. Beginning with Johnny Venters, though, it appears he's going to be beginning the season on the 15-day disabled list with an elbow sprain, so he likely is out of the equation early on, which pushes Eric O'Flaherty over the last few years, 2010 at 2.45 ERA, 2011 at 0.98 ERA, and then 2012 he had a 1.73 ERA. He has been lights out, the picture of consistency for this team. And then Craig Kimbrell's going to be the closer. Kimbrell, over the past 2 years, have saved 46 saves in 2011 and then 42 of 45 in 2012. The one thing that I would say, though, with this bullpen, with Venters out, and we don't know how long he's going to be out, an elbow sprain might sound innocent, but it could develop into more. It puts more pressure on guys in this bullpen like Jordan Walden to potentially step up and take a bigger role, because this team has put its backbone in this team is on how good this bullpen is. And if it is not as good, then it puts a lot more pressure on guys like Justin and BJ Upton, and then even some guys into this rotation.
This bullpen is just the icing on the cake to these hitters. I mean, this bullpen is just, stacked. Like Tim said, Kimbrell, O'Flaherty, Johnny Venters. And next, you're going to be getting Jordan Walden. You know, he's still young. He's going to be taking over a completely different role coming over to this Braves team because, you know, Jordan Walden, during his time with the Los Angeles Angels, he's really been, you know, the closer, a.k.a. Kind of a deep inning reliever. But now he's going to be coming over to the Atlanta Braves, where he's going to be, you know, that guy to be coming in the early innings. So, you know, it's a completely different role for him. And I had no doubt in my mind that he's going to have no issue, you know, adapting to an early reliever type of role. But, you know, when you look at these three guys, Venters, O'Flaherty, Craig Kimbrell, just those three guys is scary. Craig Kimbrell, starting off with him, the main man in this entire bullpen, the captain of that bullpen, nasty, year in and year out. You know, he's been up in the Major League level, you know, the past, you know, 3 years, and has really just taken over Major League Baseball at that closer's role. A phenomenal closer. It's just a strikeout machine when it comes to his time. Now, Eric O'Flaherty, you know, the biggest issue, like Tim said, is just this early start to the season where he's going to more than likely probably end up on the disabled list with an elbow injury. You know, when he comes back, he is nasty. He's a phenomenal late-inning reliever, a setup man. And you know what? I think Eric O'Flaherty, he's still young. And, you know, he still has a lot to improve, you know, after this surgery or possible this time on the disabled list. Next up, Johnny Venters, and another phenomenal player, the pride of Indian River Community College out there in Florida. Got to show some love out there to the Indian River Community College there.
Of course.
Johnny Venters, another great a guy who really, you know, really wowed me down there in the farm system in the early days. This is a guy who has a lot of, you know, minor league, you know, experience. This is the guy who was drafted in 2003 with the Atlanta Braves. Spent a phenomenal amount of time down there. I was really surprised that they didn't bring him up there earlier. But overall, you're seeing the full capabilities of what Johnny Venters does at the Major League level. You know, last year wowed us a little bit. I do hope that his ERA does go down, and you know, we'll just hope for the best. This is a team with that bullpen. It's just the icing on the cake overall.
Justin, I think looking at this entire team, I see a similar outcome of last year. I don't know what they're going to do in the playoffs yet. We're going to do a World Series predictions video on Saturday, but it's a team that, if the rotation goes the right way, they can be dangerous in the playoffs, and I do believe they will be in the playoffs. I think they're going to win a wild card, and I believe that this year they will at least win that first playoff game. I think about 94 wins again.
Yeah, I see they're around there around there as well. That was what I'm trying to say. But, you know, Freddie Gonzalez, who's a manager of this team, you know, this is a guy who comes over from the Miami Marlins after a really bizarre stint with them. You know, it's just, you know, a down year with them. And then coming over to the Atlanta Braves, I've always thought, you know, are we going to see the Freddie Gonzalez in Florida, the Florida Marlins at the time? And you know what? We've seen a complete turnaround in his managing skills. And you know what? This team has just success written all over it. You got the two Upton brothers. The biggest concern there is the consistency. And are we going to have, you know, a positive season for them? You know, you got the, you know, a solid infield. You got Freeman, Ugla, Simmons, Chris Johnson, Juan Francisco, Jason Hayward also there in right field. I don't want to leave him out. And you also have this bullpen, just the icing on the cake. You know what, this team, you know, it has World Series capabilities on them. Are they going to make it? You'll just have to wait for our World Series predictions for me and Tim.
Yeah, you will have to wait and see that. Thank you for tuning in. I'm Tim Kelly for Justin Godsey. Big shout outs to Indian River Community College. We will catch you guys next time.